I am honored to introduce you to Father Robert Spitzer, founder of the Magis Center for Reason and Faith. The Magis Center aims to revitalize Catholic and Christian belief among contemporary Americans. In an effort to turn the tide of millennial unbelief, he regularly appears on EWTN and Catholic radio, sharing his findings regarding the scientific evidence for God and the Catholic faith. He is also president of the Spitzer Center for Catholic Organizations and the chief education officer for the Ethics and Performance Institute. He was president of Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington from 1998 to 2009. During that time, he significantly increased the programs and curricula in faith and ethics, led the efforts to build 20 new facilities, increased the student population by 75%, and raised more than $200 million for scholarships and capital projects. We are delighted that he is here to speak with us and challenge us to support Catholic education. Please welcome Father Robert Spitzer.
Thank you so much.
The microphone's along your neck.
Thank you for that wonderfully kind, articulate introduction. I'm hiring you the minute you get out of school. I mean, really, honestly, unbelievable. So, Bishop Tyson, what an honor it is to be back with you again, and Kathleen Wilmus, thank you, and Becky Cates, who's just been with me throughout the last 2 days, really helping me, without whom I wouldn't be able to do anything. Thank you, all you board members and partners and gold, silver, platinum level benefactors. Honestly, you have made possible the education that is so required, whether that education be in our good Catholic schools or whether it be in our pastoral programs. You have really done a marvelous job in helping that effort to move forward. And that $200,000, it really, I experienced the last 2 days with the Catholic teachers and with all the faith formators and youth ministers who are all able to attend because of your generosity. Really, truly, amazingly good results. Why am I here? Why is Catholic education necessary? Whether that's in a faith formation program, whether that's in youth ministry, whether that's in a good Catholic middle school or high school, elementary school, why do we need it? Our kids today really face a crisis that we didn't have to face. If you thought it was bad in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, nothing compared to today, the challenges of today. I don't want to bore you with all the statistics, but I'll just simply give you a few of them. The first is that 44% of our kids will lose their faith. I'm not saying they're going to drop out of the Catholic Church. Oh, they'll certainly do that. But 44% will lose their faith in God. That's what's going to happen, and the percentage increase is going to get higher. And Catholic schools, Catholic faith formation, youth ministry is the only way to stop it, with a curriculum that we can really present the facts, as Monsignor was just saying on that wonderful video. As he was just saying, if we don't get the information out to these kids, and where are we going to get the information out to them? It's got to be in the middle schools. It's got to be in the high schools. It's got to be in the confirmation program. It's got to be in the youth ministry. We got to pound it home. And the reason is because the culture is going to pound it home as hard as they can, that God is nonsensical, that the soul really doesn't exist, you're just a bunch of atoms and molecules, that Jesus Christ is not even real, let alone risen from the dead, with that ha at the end. I remember, you know, that smug look, and I was basically debating Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mladenov and Deepak Chopra on the Larry King show a while back, and during that the debate, that smug, I could actually see it that time, the smug look, you know, just drove me nuts, because it's all a bunch of baloney. The reason we need Catholic high schools and grade schools is to refute the myths. Let me just give a few of the myths and some of the responses. But what did the Pew survey say? The first myth, the first and foremost myth, is that faith and science are contradictory. Our kids, they are so vulnerable. 13 is the mean age that they're going to leave. They're going to make the decision to leave their faith. Yes, they may wait until high school, please mom, before they get out. You know, then of course they get to college and bingo bango, they're gone. So we've got a little challenge here, but the Catholic school curriculum, last 2 days, we have been just equipping people as fast as we can, thanks to your generosity, to put these 7 essential modules into the high schools, the middle schools, the confirmation programs, youth ministries, in any way we can, to have our good teachers here and our good faith formators, to have them basically bring this message not only to the kids, but to themselves and ultimately to the parents. This evidence is not well known even by the parents. We'll be doing a parents program shortly, but this is what your generosity is really doing. The faith, of course, a poor kid who comes along, hears this faith and science are contradictory. Well, science must be true, therefore faith has to be false. Can't have both, you know, faith and science if they're contradicting one another. So this is a problem. Let me just go through some of the myths that surround this problem and maybe how to answer it. The first thing that the kids are told is most scientists are atheists. Wrong. That is not true. The latest poll that the Pew survey did of the American Association for the Advancement of Science shows conclusively that 51% of working bench scientists are theists, believers in God, and many of them very much Christian believers, religious believers as well. 77% of physicians, 77%, you know, that's over 3/4 of physicians are believers in God. And of that group, 70% of them are either moderate or active in their religious commitments. So wait a minute. We've got wrong facts that are being given to our kids over the social media, over the, the traditional media. Just turn on the television. You can hear the myths being spewed. There's absolutely no attention to surveys, no attention to social science, no attention to detail, and certainly no attention to the natural sciences. I mean, it is unbelievable what is going on. So we have these, as I said, 7 essential modules that we're trying to implement and all the faith programs that you're supporting that will help to do that. Let me just talk about a second minute. These are some of the things that your students, your children, or the students that you're supporting in this area, all the way up to Wenatchee and all the way down to the southern counties. This is what your funds will support they're getting. First, they'll know what scientists and doctors really believe. Number 2, they're going to know a lot of evidence for God from contemporary cosmology. Right now, there is a considerable amount of it. Why are most scientists theists? By the way, only 36% are agnostics and atheists. Just saying. So something is wrong with the polling of the traditional and social media. The point, though, is why do they believe? And one of the reasons they believe is a thing called the Board of Vilenkin and Guth Proof. Arvind Borda over at the University of California, Santa Barbara, Alexander Vilenkin, the director of Institute of Cosmology at Tufts University in Boston, and Ellen Guth has a high chair of cosmology at MIT, came together in 2003 and produced a proof which was called the Board of Vilenkin and Guth Proof, but now it's called the BVG Proof because nobody wanted to say Board of Vilenkin and Guth all the time. So the key thing is that they came up with a proof that actually shows that any condition, any universal condition, whether it be a universe, a multiverse, a string universe in the higher dimensional space of string theory, whether it be a cyclic universe, exploding, contracting, re-exploding, recontracting, whatever it may be, any configuration that has an average Hubble expansion, that is to say, an average expansion rate of the universe or the multiverse greater than 0, has to have a beginning. This is what, has to be told to kids. This proof is a very elegant proof. Hey, there's been no shortage of attempts to disprove it since 2003, and no one has been able to do it. It's too eloquent. So it's too elegant. And so the point, of course, that we need to convey to the kids is, hey, this proof is out there. And every multiverse needs a beginning, ladies and gentlemen. You can't have a multiverse without inflation. You can't have a string universe in the higher dimensional space of string theory without nucleation. Everything's expanding, which means it needs a beginning. Now, a beginning in science is a very interesting phenomenon indeed, because if you have a beginning in physics, that means a beginning of physical space and physical time. So the beginning, there's no physical time before the beginning of physical reality. Now, if that's the truth, then I can tell you one thing that physical reality was prior to its beginning. Nothing. No energy, no space, no time, etc. And of course, the students will get this equation right away. Nothing is nothing. If physical reality is nothing, then the only thing it can do when it's nothing is nothing. Because nothing can't do anything. It can only do nothing. And this is a problem. But if physical reality was nothing and could only do nothing, I can assure you of this: physical reality, when it was nothing, did not cause itself to exist, because the only thing it could do is nothing. The point is clear. Therefore, there has to be a transphysical, supernatural reality outside of universal, multiversal, string universal space-time asymmetry, which has to blast the whole thing into creation out of nothing. That's the point. Now, wouldn't it be nice if kids knew this? They can, by simply hitting the space bar on module number 2 in the 7 essential modules, which the teachers have been getting a look at over the last 2 days. Just a couple of other things. Another big myth. Another great one: the soul doesn't exist. The soul is just simply a figment of the religious imagination gone awry. Take us, our physicalist explanations, as truly sincere. You're just a bunch of atoms and molecules. At best, you're quantum mechanical, maybe quantum fields that are arrayed together that look like they have a semblance of intelligence. Really? That's all there is to it? Well, over the last 14 years, there have been several really excellent peer-reviewed medical studies of near-death experiences. I'll just sum up by saying that these excellent, the Lancet study, these are published in first-rate medical journals. They're longitudinal studies looked over by many people. 2,060 in the Samuel Parnia study. There was nearly 600 in the Lancet study done by Pim von Lommel, etc. These are really first-rate studies. What do they show? There's enough veridical data out there, that is to say, verifiable data by independent researchers after the fact. There's enough veridical data out there to show that you have a transphysical soul. When you die, I'm going to bet on it. When you die, your soul, your transphysical soul, is going to leave your body. And it will be able to see, it will be able to hear, it will be able to think, it will be able to remember. Every one of your memories will be intact. And not only that, you will be able to remember everything that's going on while you're quote-unquote physically dead. We're talking about flat EEG, fixed and dilated pupils, no gag reflexes. I mean, your brain has no thinking capacity, no electrical activity in the cerebral cortex, no thinking, no electrical activity in the frontal cortex. You're going to have no judgment, no electrical activity, or mere sputterings of neurons in your lower brain. I hate to tell you this, but you're not even going to be able to move your arm. You're not even going to be able to have a heartbeat. Alas, you are as close to physical death as you can get. Now, what do they discover? They discover when that soul leaves the body and can hear and speak and so forth and so on, can see everything going on, it can report data accurately. And I'll just give you 2 instances. One person says, the doctor comes in the room and says, sorry, we lost your dentures. No, you didn't lose my dentures at all. The nurse with the red hair just grabbed the dentures out of my mouth just before you were going to put on the paddles, opened this drawer under a machine that looks like this, threw in the dentures and slammed it. And if you go into the OR, the operating room right now, and you look in a drawer that's under this machine, you'll see my dentures. There they are. Who knew? He knew. And of course, how did he know? Well, he wasn't doing it with his physical brain. We can be assured of that. This lady, she leaves her body, she has a heart attack. 30 seconds later, she's outside of her body. She's sitting there looking from the outside. She passes right through the hospital wall, looking from the outside, looking in. And she sees a tennis shoe on the third floor ledge up there that nobody's seen for years, with a shoelace under the heel and a worn left toe. And so she comes back and says, there's a shoelace out there on your hospital ledge. One of the researchers, Dr. Melvin Morse, actually crawled out on that ledge there, takes the picture, and grabs the very dirty tennis shoe after 20 years, grabs it, brings it back in. It's precisely as she described it. Just saying, by the way, always treat your relatives who are in the waiting room next door. If you're in the waiting room next door, you got to make sure you're really nice to the person who's in the operating room or had the heart attack. They can go right through the operating room walls and right into the waiting room and hear everything and see everything you're saying and doing. And of course, this has come back to haunt many over the years. So be nice, as they say, if you're waiting in the waiting room. Just kidding. But no, I'm not kidding. This happens all the time. So what's the point? Why are 77% of doctors, theists, everybody? Because they don't believe that they do not believe that consciousness resides in the brain alone. I call it the soul in its brain. There's something else going on there. I think medical professionals, especially around the life and death situation, they have an awareness that there's something very transphysical about human beings. It's not reducible to a physicalist explanation. By the way, this matters to me. 81% of blind people see when they're clinically dead. These are people who are blind from birth. So we have one of our embedded videos in the modules, in our first module, is a blind kid. He's 16 years old, and he's never seen, before in his whole life. And he says, well, he had a heart attack, and during the heart attack, he basically went right through the hospital walls, and he's outside. And he says, this is the first, and he's describing this. This is the first time in my life I ever saw snow. Of course, I felt snow. I heard it crunch underneath my feet, but I never, ever really had any real sense of what it looked like. And I saw the train tracks that were embedded, in the falling snow. And then I saw this train pass by, and the train, by the way, you can actually time when he was, clinically dead and when the train was actually passing by. And there was actually a train passing by exactly as he described. And he says, that train that was passing by had a big sign on it, on the back of it, and it had an arrow pointing to the right. Now, how could he possibly know this? He couldn't even do this when he was, if he were back in his body again. He couldn't see it. He never has a visual image. How are you going to use any physicalist explanation to explain this? Are you kidding me? Blind people don't hallucinate in visual images because they don't have any in their physical brain. There's hallucination, anoxia, morphine or some other drug that's administered, to a pharmaceutical is administered to alleviate pain, etc. It won't work. Blind people just can't see, and they don't have any of these visual images in their mind. And these kids are literally there. I have been there. I've seen it. I've seen the comments that we have in all the beta tests where the kids are actually going, "How'd that happen?" And they're going, "No way." And the teachers are going, "Way, it really does happen." And so, all of a sudden, one of the kids actually said in New York, said, "This really did it for me." He said, even though they went on to go to heaven and they had a heavenly experience in a bright white light that was very loving, he just said, I saw this, he said, and I heard that, I just couldn't explain it. I mean, maybe I do have a soul, and maybe I do have an eternal life. Maybe there is something to live for. You bet there is. And by the way, these are peer-reviewed studies. There are really hundreds of these veridical cases that have been verified after the fact. So what I'm trying to say is kids deserve to know. Of course they do. Your good funds, your generous funds are paying for them so that they can actually hear these things and make a real good informed judgment. Just one last thing. It's on Jesus. A lot of the myths that come out are on, well, Jesus is not real. Jesus is just, unfortunately, figment of New Testament imagination. He's like, Osiris in Egypt or something like that. Great myth, etc., etc. Nothing could be further from the truth, aside from the fact that 4 enemies of Christianity living within living memory of Jesus, right? Cornelius, Tacitus, Flavius Josephus. By the way, Cornelius Tacitus, he was a Roman historian, didn't like Christianity. Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian, writing for whom? The Romans, right? Suetonius, and the Babylonian Talmud itself, which says that Jesus is miracle working. Yeah, okay, he did miracles, but he was a sorcerer. That's how he did it. Well, the only reason you're saying that is because the truth is out. Everybody knows. I mean, we have absolutely terrific historical evidence that for Jesus' existence, his crucifixion, etc. And certainly the fact that he was doing powerful, miraculous deeds, we all know these things. The explanation, of course, of being the devil or sorcery, this came out even in Jesus' time. But kids deserve to know. But the Shroud of Turin is the biggest and best little information packet. Now, some of you were there. I'm just going to bore you for a few more minutes. Please fall asleep if you wish, and if you were there today. But I give a whole talk on it. This is the most amazing relic. It's the most... Okay, it's the most unique relic that we have, it's the most scientifically tested. 178 tests have been performed, scientific tests on this one relic. The carbon dating of 1988, which dated it from 1348 or whatever it was, that they dated it as a medieval forgery. I'm telling you, it's been completely debunked. I'm not going to obviously be able to go through the details of the debunking, but you could do yourselves a favor. Just go to magiscenter.com, M-A-G-I-S center.com, and just click on the article called Science and the Shroud of Turin. It just tells you this was the biggest bogus sample that was ever taken from a controversial corner on the shroud. Dr. Tristan Casabianca actually finally got, after 30 years of petitioning the British Museum on the Freedom of Information Act, finally got the raw data and found so much stratification, variegation of the data, not just among the samples, right? They took one sample, split it into 3 parts, not just variegation and stratification among the 3 parts of that sample, but within the samples themselves. There's no way that this sample represents the linen on the actual cloth. It's a combination of fibers from different eras. That is the conclusion. He and his team conclude it is impossible to conclude from this data, from this raw data, under statistical analysis, it's impossible to conclude that this came out of the Middle Ages. More probably, it did not. Now, looking at that and the fact that, there are coins on the man's eyes, which were photographed along with the image of the man himself, which I believe to be Jesus. Those are Roman leptons. They have 4 enigmas on them. And guess when the minting of those 4 enigmas actually occurred? We can actually prove this by polarized digital overlay analysis. We can prove that these coins represent a single minting in history. One minting only. It was done in 29 AD by Pontius Pilate in Jerusalem. that has these 4 enigmas and all the numismatic collections, and sitting there, 2 of them right on the man's eyes. Boy, I'll tell you, that medieval forger was a very crafty fellow. He was able to locate the precise minting of bunch of these particular Roman leptons, worth less than a cent, right? And so there they are on the man's eyes. What's my point? My point is the crucifixion evidence is fantastic, but what kids need to know more than anything is the resurrection evidence. I'll just tell you right now, no vapor could have produced this, no liquid could have produced this, no scorching could have produced it. There's only one energy source we know of in physics that can produce this, and that is light. Because this image is a perfect 3-dimensional photographic negative image emblazoned on a non-photographically sensitive linen cloth. Now, what does that mean? That means, ladies and gentlemen, that you're going to need 6 to 8 billion, with a B, billion watts of light energy in order to produce that perfect photographic negative image. That's the first thing. Dead bodies do not normally produce 6 to 8 billion watts of light energy, which is the equivalent of 500,000 searchlights worth of light emanating from every 3-dimensional point in that body. That's what it would require. This is highly unusual, I assure you, unique in history. But the one thing is, it couldn't last for more than 1/40 billionth of a second. Because if it lasted 1 microsecond longer than 1/40 billionth of a second, there wouldn't be any shroud left, and there wouldn't even be the smoke residual left over from the complete annihilation of the shroud. For all intents and purposes, we have to get it from a single burst of hugely intense light energy. By the way, if you'd been in that tomb, you can thank your lucky stars that you weren't. You'd be blinder than me. And not only that, you'd have a really bad suntan after 1/40 billionth of a second. I mean sunburn after 1/40 billionth of a second. What's my point? This is highly unusual for dead bodies to do. But more than that, you just have to take my word for it. That cloth is going to have to penetrate 3/16 of an inch. The body will have to turn mechanically transparent. The body will have to become spiritual. Spiritual body, 6 to 8 billion watts of light energy. That is the evidence of Jesus' resurrection in glory and spirit. The precise ways in which the Christian church differentiated itself from the Jewish view of the resurrection. That it would be a spiritual and glorified body. There it is in the cloth. Our kids deserve to know it. And now, thanks to your generosity, our confirmation teachers, our catechists, our high school and middle school teachers have all been informed of this resource. Bishop Tyson is just rolling it out across the entire diocese for people to do. The teachers are going to be discussing it among themselves. They're actually going to appropriate the information. It's all available to them now. They can download it, access it, and when they do that, this is going to make a huge difference to the lives of your kids. Whether they're in a catechism class, whether they're in a confirmation class, whether they're in middle school or in a high school. Your generosity has been so great in allowing this to be given to the teachers. Please just be generous tonight. Follow through so that our students, as many students, whatever their economic level, they can actually hear this information, that their faith can be vouchsafed, that they're not going to be just put asunder in a college classroom where the teacher goes, well, you naive poor little thing, you know, didn't you know that science disproved God? And our students will be able to raise their hands and go, well, haven't you heard of the Board of Lincoln and Guth proof, the entropy evidence, the fine-tuning evidence? Hey, you ought to take a look at the peer-reviewed medical studies of near-death experiences. I think you're uninformed. If they could do that, they would be our evangelizers. Thanks so much, everyone. God bless you for your generosity.